Hey, everybody. Welcome to Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me, my new live conversation podcast. Tonight's special guest on this 420 is our good friend, Mr. John Craigie, reporting from Portland, Oregon. How's it going, John?
Yo, it's going good. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. Thanks so much for being part of this.
Yeah.
So if you're out there watching this right now, one way you can help us out is share this, start a watch party, and also comment below where you're watching from. We're going to go through all these comments afterwards and try to reply to people and tune in. So let us know where you're watching from. And if you've seen Craigie perform before, let us know where you first saw him play, whether it was at a big place or a small place. Let us know how you discovered John Craigie. And if it's your first time introducing yourself to him, welcome, and I think you're going to be in for a big treat. He's one of my favorite songwriters, one of my favorite people, and no one makes me laugh harder than John Craigie. Anyways, it's so great to have you, man. So,
Man.
how you hold up during all this?
Yeah, holding. I keep reminding myself that it could be worse. And what I've been telling friends is that it makes me feel like I could handle rich person prison. Not that I couldn't handle regular prison, but like in the movies when rich person prison is like, you're stuck there, but you got like kitchens and it's nice, That's kind of how it feels here. It's like prison, but nobody's beating you up and it's, you're eating decent food. So that's kind of how it feels.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now you're not at home alone either, so that's nice.
Yeah. It's a good crew. I know I feel for all the people out there that are, solo quarantining. That would be like definitely some castaway Tom Hanks, Wilson shit, like you definitely be having to talk to some inanimate objects, but I got a good crew here, so it's nice.
That's awesome, man. And I've been seeing you've been doing some live performances from your living room there,
Yeah.
and I saw the first one you did, and it was incredible. There was like 1,800 people watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Have you ever headlined a show where there's 1,800 people in the room?
No, I definitely made a comment about that. That was the biggest solo Craigie audience for sure. I mean, I guess not counting a festival, but yeah, that was definitely, yeah, that's what it seems like for sure.
And you probably had, no expectation of how many people were going to tune in and be there. So that must have been crazy.
Yeah, not at all. I haven't done, that was my first live stream, I think maybe I'd done some like fun stuff with friends, like at backstage. I'd never done anything like that before. So yeah, I had no idea who was going to be watching or how it was going to go down. It's an awkward, I think it's an awkward medium. I'm glad it exists. And some people are really good at it, but I definitely have a long way to go before I master that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you were saying before we fired this thing up that, because a big part of your show is telling jokes in between songs and saying a joke to potentially 2,000 people, but getting zero response.
Yeah.
That's got to feel, you don't know if it worked or not. You just assume you assumed it worked, I'm sure.
I guess, the science of humor is very interesting in that there's a difference between saying something and it being like funny and saying something and it like makes you laugh. You know what I mean? And part of laughter comes from a collective sort of contagion that happens in a room when everyone's laughing together. You know what I mean? Like you're going to laugh a lot more at a movie when you're at the movie theater and everyone's laughing than if you're by yourself. Not to say that you won't laugh by yourself, but it's very rare that you're like watching it, The Simpsons or SNL by yourself and you're like, ha, ha, ha. You know what I mean? So even if your joke is going to deliver to that person or two people watching on their laptop, it's just, they're not going to be like rolling on the floor like they possibly would, at Great American Music Hall sold out or something like that. You know what I mean?
For sure. Well, so I've been a fan of yours and known you for going on 15 years now, which is really cool. So for those who don't know, like I'm a concert promoter here in San Francisco, but when I met John, I'm just normal dude working 9 to 5, out for a burger and a beer at a place in San Rafael called Broken Drum. And there was this band playing in the corner, mixing up covers, originals, and this long-haired dude fronting the band with a painted guitar, and totally won me over. I bought this. This is the actual copy of the CD. I bought me some Daddy Longlegs that night.
Wow.
Now, we'll get into some of this as we go along here, but there's a lot of new Craigie fans out there in the last few years that have discovered you through seeing you open for Jack Johnson. Some of your songs have really taken off on streaming services and really opened up your audience to a wider thing. I don't even know if you can purchase this CD anywhere else. I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.
like not at the merch table, 100%.
Yeah, that one is definitely full out of print, where a few of the other ones I think you can get, well, for a while there. Yeah, there you go. It's long hair.
2005 Craigie right there.
Yeah, I think some of them you could get on CD Baby, but CD Baby recently just stopped their normal way of shipment. So possibly Amazon. I think Amazon, you can get some of those.
Okay.
Yeah, but not that I'm encouraging such a action.
I love all those old records.
No, me too.
But that's how I got in. And so it's really been special for me as a fan to see you play in the corner of a bar while people are talking, all the way up to the trajectory your career is taking you thus far. And I mean, I know a lot of folks have had some really great successes and waves of fun things happen, but I really truly feel like I've gotten to see you from point one to point where you are now, and that's been really, really cool to watch. But bringing it all back, so you're from the Southern California area where you grew up.
Yeah.
How did you get into music? What did you have a guitar growing up? What was your kind of gateway drug into getting to where you are now?
Yeah, I think it was very random. I mean, I was always very obsessed with music. Music was very much like this mystical religious thing for me as a child, mostly because even though I grew up in Los Angeles in sort of the early 90s, it was still a weird time for music. And my community was mostly based like on sports and academics. It really wasn't a musical community at all. I mean, my parents were very square and the community was very square. So I didn't know anyone who played guitar, and the neighborhood of Los Angeles I lived in, there was not like clubs or coffee shops. You also have to remember that early 90s, the coffee shop thing hadn't really hit yet. You know what I mean? As far as like how we look at it now. So it was just by luck that I was kind of nerdy, and I was friends with another kind of nerdy guy. And as you know, like the nerdy people usually are the most creative and the most like tuned into that kind of stuff. And so I was hanging with a lot of jocks, but this one kid was my best friend, and he started playing guitar. And then he started showing me some chords on it, and that was that. And so I ended up when I was 16, I got my first guitar, and we were really obsessed with like Pearl Jam at that time. This would be like 96, so this was just in the beginning of what's called post grunge, which is sort of like not great, but it is my youth. So we were really into Green Day and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, of course, but then also like the newer things like Bush and Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, Third Eye Blind. Third Eye Blind was a couple years later, I think, but Wallflowers, all that stuff, Matchbox 20. So it was a time, that's what I started off being really into. And I immediately started writing songs. They were very bad. Mostly I blame it on my influences. And then in my senior year of high school, my English teacher gave me a Bob Dylan album, Freewheeling Bob Dylan, which has like Blowin' in the Wind, Don't Think Twice, Masters of War. And that was the first time that I had heard that kind of music. So I credit that to sort of being, that's sort of the beginning for me, is on my way out of high school into college, starting to write decent like folk type songs.
I feel like our album collection is pretty similar.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because that all those bands you listed, I had every single one of those CDs or whatever.
Me too. Me too.
I was actually supposed to be at the Pearl Jam show yesterday in Oakland. It would have been this weekend. Yeah. So that's yeah, man. The 90s were real, and trying to write like that is really hard when you're by yourself too. I mean,
Oh, for sure. Well, it's the 90s. I always say it was a weird time for the songwriter until late 90s when like Jewel and Tracy Chapman and that kind of stuff started rolling in. And then Jack Johnson, I think, being kind of like that he's like early 2000s really being the gateway of or bringing back kind of like the notion of the guy with the guitar. But mid 90s, being alone in your room and trying to sort of be inspired by these kind of musicians, Pearl Jam, it was such big, anthemic music. Even Guns N' Roses too was a big thing. That's a little bit beforehand, but that was the shit that I was trying to learn on the Olga online guitar archive or whatever that's, you know that thing? It was the
yeah. You get like
yeah,
the tabs.
yeah. That was the jam when I was a kid, and so. But then, yeah, again, I discovered Dylan, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can play all these songs, and they sound pretty much just like how he played them, you know. So that's exciting.
Did you pick up harmonica around that time too when you started learning Dylan? Was that the inspiration?
Yeah, so when I heard Dylan, but honestly, before Dylan, I had listened to Pearl Jam's No Code. Do you know that record?
Oh, of course, yeah.
I think that's 95.
The song
Forgive me.
Smile.
Yeah, yeah. And so the song Smile had harmonica on it, and I was a big nerd, so I had read about that. And I read the Neil Young comparison, you know. And so then I somehow, you know, back then it was a little bit harder. You didn't have like Spotify and stuff. But I think I had heard Heart of Gold around that same time, which I think Smile is very much like an homage to that. And that's when I was like, oh, cool, I got to get on this. And so I went to the Guitar Center and got myself the necklace and my first harmonica in C probably. And then that's where it began.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in the early days, so you've got your guitar, you're into Dylan, and then you end up going to college, I believe, in Santa Cruz, right?
Oh yeah, totally. UC Santa Cruz.
Now at this time, are you writing songs yet, or you?
Oh yeah.
You're writing. Okay, you're writing and learning Dylan and being
Yeah,
inspired. Yeah. Now, when you were in Santa Cruz, you had a band there.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
We sure can, yeah. Well, so yeah, my first couple of years at Santa Cruz, I'm still in the songwriter mode. Still not writing very good songs, but it's basically the hippiness is opening my mind to all other kinds of music, you know, not just Grateful Dead, but like more Dylan, more James Taylor, Pink Floyd, a lot of the just, you know, a lot more guitar people and stuff. But yeah, I formed a band called Pond Rock in my junior year of college. This is sort of the peak of jam bands. You know, Fish was huge at that time. All the other guys are starting to sprout up. And so, yeah, we were a quartet. Leo was on guitar and keys. I was on guitar, lead guitar. And then we had a drummer and a bass player. And we played living rooms and parks and like all the normal hippie jam band type thing. It was pretty amazing.
Now, where can the fans find some Pond Rock?
Yeah, you know, by the grace of all the music gods, this was before recording was pretty accessible. So I don't think gratefully that you can. There's really not much online.
You had to be there.
Yeah, please, yes. That's what I always tell people. You know, I think I definitely have some old live recordings of Pond Rock, and it's interesting to listen to, but being there was the most important thing, and preferably as high as possible.
That's fantastic. Well,
yeah.
To kind of segue into our next section, could you play a song for us? By chance, could you play a song maybe like of your choice, of course, but like from those earlier days, something maybe you wouldn't, if that's springing too much of a surprise on you. I don't.
Hold on. Well, let me think. Yeah.
You do whatever you want, but.
Yeah. You know what? I'll do this let me do this one actually, because this is something that I just recently worked up. Back in 2008 I think it was 2008 or 2007, I put out a record called Soft Hail, which is the last of the records that are out of print. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Casey. And I always liked that record, you know, and I made that with Trent Boshin and Kevin Hobson, who are two amazing musicians. I know you know Trent and Kevin. And that was our last outing together. And I think that's our best piece, but you know, we were limited just by the tools we had, you know, both physically and like also just the timing of that in sort of recording. But I like those songs. And so this is a song that I kind of changed the rhythm and the vibe of it a little bit, but this is back from those days. It's called Grand Junction, and it goes like this. Is that okay? I remember you so vividly. Feed me an apple like you were my even all. Got in the Eden, we both knew by morning we would be kicked out. Got bruise on your chin from the night before when you drank too much and you fell to the floor. Tonight wasn't too much different, girl. I was just there to break your fall. And you there with nothing but my song. Letting go, just as no one's holding on. Been so well behaved, could have made that sweet mistake. Made love like it ain't never been made, like we would give birth to. But it ended up just as it did. One sweet interrupted kiss, and your double lips telling me that I was strong. With nothing but my song. Letting go, just as no one's holding on. Yeah. This winter too, it shall fade. The green always rises up again. I hope the snow angels that we made built down naked into the grass. I hope you don't forget about me. I sang you to sleep. Oh, I was just talking that road through your Saturday. With nothing but my song. Letting go, just no one's holding on. Letting go, just no one's holding on.
Nice.
So I've been doing that a little bit, yeah, reworking some of the older tunes for either future recordings or just live performances. But I like bringing some of those back.
Well, I mean, as a longtime fan, that makes me happy because there's some really great songs buried deep in those first albums that a lot of people probably have never heard because they don't really float to the top with your newer stuff that's getting more promotion behind it. And
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool.
So that's cool.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
So for those of you guys just joining us, welcome. This is my guest, John Craigie. I'm Casey Turner, San Francisco concert promoter. And thanks for being here on Talk to Me. If you guys want to comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from, that would be great. Share this with people so we get more people watching because that would be great as well. Also, there's going to be a link in the comments that goes directly to John's merchandise. He's got tons of cool merch. I'm repping the hat right now.
Yeah,
There's
those are almost out of print. I think those are grab those while you can.
Yeah, I even noticed for a split second, Jack Johnson was live on his Instagram the other day for like 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And I was watching it, and someone requested the John Craigie song, and he's like, "Oh, I can't do that without John. You're probably requesting that because I'm wearing his shirt." So even Jack Johnson, ladies and gentlemen, reps the Craigie merch. So be like sweet. Jack, go and buy some merchandise. And there's also a way you can tip us to help support this podcast. And because guess how much I'm making right now? Nothing. Because there's no shows. Yeah. So anyways, thank you for all y'all for tuning in. Also, if the sound on Zoom is not perfect for music and stuff, so it just kind of is what it is right now. But if you guys want to catch John play a full set, he's doing those here and there on his Facebook page.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do another one in May. I'm trying to time them with my single releases, so somewhere in mid-May we'll probably do another stream.
Cool. So just be sure to like his Facebook page for updates on that. So from pond rock to writing your own songs, eventually college wrapped up and you started touring. When did you
Yeah.
start touring?
Yeah. Right after college, I got a teaching job. I taught math, which a lot of people think is a joke, but it's very, I mean, it was, in a lot of ways, it was a joke, but it was, it did happen. I did that for about a year. I did not like it, and I really started really fantasizing about potentially having a career in music. And so, like most of us, no one was banging on the door, no agents, no record labels. And, I really believed that, like a lot of things in life, you just have to kind of kickstart it yourself. So, the summer of my 24th year on this earth, I called up a bunch of coffee shops from between Santa Cruz and Boulder, Colorado, and did my first tour. And I went down, I did I think I did Salt Lake, Moab, Cedar City, Boulder, Denver, and maybe like near Vegas. I can't remember now, but it was sort of that loop. And it was great, and I didn't like lose a bunch of money. I made like some money. I had a CD to sell at the merch table, tip jars. Some venues would give me a few bucks, and my overhead was so low. I had my Ford Taurus, and people were giving me couches. So I learned a lot on that tour, that it was doable.
And that was the first tour you did in the Ford Taurus.
Did I lose
Do you know?
Casey?
It's break. I think your internet might be breaking up.
Yeah. About maybe 2 weeks. Let me see what I got here.
Yeah, let me see.
It might be mine
too. There we go. I made sure I disconnected my phone. The power of live here.
We do the same.
Gentlemen. Yeah. Let me disconnect my iPad over here too. Let's see if that helps.
Okay. Let's try it now.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I think we were rocking along pretty good there. Okay. So, what year was that when you did your first tour? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was summer of 2004.
So I think I saw you just a year later.
Oh.
Hang on one second. I'm gonna turn this iPad off because I think I'm still getting some internet issues here. There we go. All right.
Yeah.
I can't wait to be in a room with people and not have to deal with all this crap. Technical difficulties. Okay. So I recall you were touring a bunch. You were coming. I feel like San Francisco was kind of your home base there for a minute, or at least you considered it. But there was a moment you were touring just nonstop. And I remember one time you told me, you were like, it's kind of like it's addictive. It's like a tattoo. You get one, you got to get another, and and you just toured and toured and toured for a long time. And I feel like every tour progressively got better. You were generating more fans, generating better income. Eventually, you got the Astro van.
Yeah.
That was like a game changer, right? Yeah.
Well, then that became a way to sort of really be a lot more full time on the road, and I could essentially live out of that, And that was right around when I was not teaching at all. Yeah.
Now that Astro van, it went through several engines, right? Because you put a lot of miles on it.
Yeah, over 300,000 for sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then how many shows do you think a year you were playing around that time?
Probably in the peak of it, definitely over 200. I mean, it was just sort of as many as I could do. I had really nothing else going on. So, back then, since it was not about quality, but more about quantity. And, each show maximized my exposure and my, tip jar money. So I think, probably close to, high or mid 200s at that time. Because I really wasn't doing much else with my life.
So you would tour, come back to the Bay Area, and like crank out a new record. I feel like that was your rhythm.
Totally.
With that.
And that was
Trent,
yeah, that was one of the reasons why I would stop touring, was just either holidays or to record.
That's incredible. So so at that point you're playing a lot of coffee shops, a lot of house concerts, some small venues around the country. At
Yeah.
what point did you start to see that transition from fewer kind of DIY shows and coffee shops to people actually buying a ticket to come see you play?
Yeah, that was for me, a very gradual progression. And when I give advice to young songwriters, I always suggest to them to sort of speed up that process, because I was very conservative and cautious with that, because what it is it's the move from free shows to ticketed shows, And what happens is this: in the beginning, you realize that a ticketed show is more fun because it's quieter and people are listening, but you make less because less people are coming, theoretically. And so you pad your tours with, like, let's say the bar gig, let's say Broken Drum in San Rafael gives you $300 or whatever, boom, that's great. No matter that, and it's $300 no matter if no one comes or if it's packed. So that's good. And then let's say, what was that place called? The Red Vic. Remember the Red Vic?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
on Haight Street.
Yeah.
Someone just reminded me the other day. Oh, I first heard about Craigie because you drugged me to that show. I'm like, dude, that was like 16 years, 14
Yeah,
years ago. Yeah.
So
Anyways.
something like the Red Vic, which I give props for because they were one of the first places that let me play there, and they treated their musicians well. I'm assuming that they took a very small cut, if they took anything, So let's say we were charging $10, but maybe if we're lucky, 20 people come. You know what I'm saying? And we're doing, we got to haul everything in there. So, I was more. It's a risk. It's riskier to do that. But I think that I started doing more of those in the late 2000s, 7, 8, 9, and when Montana Tale came out in late 2009, I started to sort of see somewhat of an increase in more interest in that kind of thing, of a ticketed show. And I also had sort of honed in my my style of performance with the storytelling. And I realized at that point that I couldn't do that at the bar. The Broken Drum just didn't lend itself to that. Right. Another good example would be like Aroma Roasters. Remember Aroma Roasters?
Up in Santa Rosa.
Yeah. So that was like a coffee house gig where people would listen, but I don't think Aroma Roasters paid much, if anything. You know what I mean? So you're working off tips and CD sales. I would notice I would sell more CDs at those kind of shows and get more fan engagement. So it was just sort of that sort of leap of faith of like, I got to just keep doing these ticketed shows. And you were a big help in that, if you remember. I mean, obviously, because you had your shit down before a lot of other promoters in the country did. And so you were kind of like I could always count on like Casey Turner show being well put together. And, you were selling those out pretty quickly.
For sure. I mean, I don't know. I remember you did some like Hotel Utah gigs that probably had some tickets, but really it was Bazaar Cafe shows, pass the hat kind of shows. And until we started doing house shows where people were kind of like pressured, hey, it's $10 to come.
Yeah.
I feel like those were some of your first ticketed shows probably in the market consistently. Sure. And I mean, I remember we would do them for my birthday. You can actually look up like Casey Turner birthday, Craigie, and you'll see some stuff from like 2008 and stuff up there. And I mean, some of those shows, it's like, I remember being like trying to get 12 people to come,
Yeah.
And It's so crazy to see. It's another kind of just testimonial to like see like that experience to like, 600 people at the Mystic or whatever. But like, I don't know, like those years, that was really cool seeing that, because then you get an audience that's like 100% all there because they have a little bit of investment in. And when you're in that element where everyone's quiet, you don't have to do any work to win them over. And again, you were still, like you said, honing that craft down of like the rhythm of how you play funny song, serious song with a story in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once you really dial that in, I mean, I'm sure, like you said, that's when you saw some pretty different results in merch sales and just people wanting to come back. One of the things that you do, I don't know if a lot of people know this. So I've used you as an example with a lot of touring musicians asking me questions about, well, how do I get this and how do I do that? And I always tell people kind of two things. One is tour. And I've used you as an example. Like my friend John lived in his van basically for years before he was able to book a flight to New York, rent a car, and tour the East Coast. You never jumped any steps. Like you're one person, I don't feel like you've ever jumped any steps to where you are today. Yeah. Number two, keep your show fresh. I've seen so many people come through, and I've even put on a bunch of shows with people, and it's the same show for the last 6 years. And that's not going to generate a lot of new interest from the fans that were already there with you. So one thing you do that I noticed right away is before every show, you've got a set list. And I'm sure maybe you go off script sometimes, but you have a set list and you keep this notebook. So when you come back to said venue in San Francisco or Salt Lake City or Austin, Texas, you scroll back to that show and see what you opened with last time and what you closed with. So it's a different set. How did you get, that's brilliant, by the way. And I
Oh,
can't believe I don't see more people doing that, just to kind of keep a gauge of like what you played last time, so you know not to repeat the exact same stories, and especially when you have so many stories and jokes and stuff. So what inspired you to do that, and did you notice that that's just it's a really good idea.
yeah, I attribute that to we funnily enough, Third Eye Blind. When I was 17, I saw Third Eye Blind twice in 1 year. Shame on me, of course, but no, I'm kidding. All respect to the TEB. But I was a kid, I hadn't seen that many shows, but I saw them. I think I saw them in LA and I saw them in Irvine. And anyway, they were great. No disrespect to those guys, but they did the banter, which not like Third Eye Blind is known for their banter, but the banter was exactly the same both shows. You know what I mean? Like note for note, almost like you were going to see a musical. And I just remember thinking that, and the friend I went with, he had also been with me at the other show. We both were just kind of like, that's lame, because the thing about when you talk to the audience, it's a special moment. They feel like, oh, you're acknowledging us and this is interesting. And also too, like in the 90s, no one was talking. You see Pearl Jam and they'd say like one word, which I don't think is a bad thing, but that's just how they were. And so I just remember thinking that always, like, that just stuck with me. And so when I started to do storytelling, first of all, I was like, I need to make sure that every night I'm telling the story as if I would tell it to a person, not as if I'm like in a musical theater program. But also too, I was like, I just knew that if I come to San Francisco, not 100% of the audience is going to be there again, but plenty of people will be. And I owe it to them, not only because it's weird to hear the same story twice, but also just they're paying $20 to see me again. I got to give them something different. And I think also too, from my education of jam bands like Dead and Fish, people loved those shows because they were so diverse. Now with them, it was more about like the variations of the jam, and I didn't have that. So my jams were my stories. And so I was like, I got to make that. And you got to keep track of that.
That's super smart. I wish more people would do that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I really do. And I think
seems
it's
like a no-brainer. It seems like a very obvious thing, but I mean, I see it all the time. And yeah, everyone has their own thing, but you have to think of your audience as, you have to treat them very special because they are, and you have to earn it. Each show, you don't deserve to have them there. You have to earn it totally.
And also kind of with that, making your set list and changing your show up as much as you can every time you come back to a market or town, a venue. You also retire songs. Like you've got some amazing songs that some people will probably never hear because you'll retire it. Sometimes you bring them out of retirement.
Yeah.
I think that's genius. It's kind of like if you're we'll use stand-up comedy for an example. Like, you can't do the same joke in the next special. Whereas music, you can get away with that. But there's some songs for you, especially that get such a specific laugh, or maybe they're timely. Like you had a song called Orange Alert, I remember.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really work in today's, it wouldn't be as funny because it's George Bush jokes and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I've also noticed that there's some songs that, I think have stuck since you've kind of, I call it like if your career was like the Bible, there's like the New Testament and the Old Testament Craigie. And I feel like in the New Testament Craigie, I just came up with that on the spot, by the way.
Good. I like it.
There are some funny songs that you've, I think, given a longer lifeline to than you did in previous years. Like Let's Talk This Over When We're Sober, the Todd Snyder song, which every time you play the songs, a new fan there will always be like won over 100%. Now, as a fan, a diehard fan of yours, I have a complaint. I am disappointed that Chuck Norris's Tears Cure Cancer. Too bad He Never Cries has not worked its way back into the regular set. Yeah. Even as you rock the autographed Chuck Norris photo.
My man. Yeah.
Do you mind just quickly talking about that song really quick? You don't have to play it or anything, but like.
Yeah.
That song is so many people. It's the funniest song ever.
Thank you, Casey.
And
Yeah,
also
I think,
the story with the photo. You gotta, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think they also come in waves too, but I'm lucky that I have continued to write new songs. I imagine that when I get to that point in my career, hopefully I don't, but if I do, where I don't write as much, then I will have to go back and start mining the things. But yeah, I think has to do with diversity, but also it has to do with my own personal sense of humor, I think, evolving and growing. And I think I need to sort of feel that confidence behind something in order to like deliver it well. So the Chuck Norris song specifically, I think that it seemed too easy of a laugh, and I just didn't feel like it challenged me as much as maybe some of the other ones did. But also too, yeah, you're right. It was just older, and it didn't really connect with the newer people who had found me in certain ways. But I think sometimes you have to be careful, like with some jokes, like the John Craigie joke, for example. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a pretty simple joke, but certain things, if they're a certain kind of funny at a certain vibration, if you will, to sound hippie, they resonate in a weird way that triggers these people to like get very repetitive with it, or like I have a joke on my first official live album where I talk about what's the capacity when I sell stuff out, you know what I mean? And now like I can't make a post about a sellout without at least two people being like, hey, which is fine. I mean, it's my own joke. It deserves to haunt me. And I don't blame those people. I'm very flattered that, that they have that. But so I noticed that Chuck Norris started to become one of those kind of things too, where it was sort of a thing. But yeah, my manager, Phil, also, he's one that sort of, and we got a bunch of requests for it when I did my all request live stream a few weeks ago. We had like a spreadsheet, and Phil managed to point out that there was a significant amount of Chuck Norris requests. So it'll come back, I'm sure, when there's time.
And then, of course, the autograph picture, because Chuck got to actually hear the song, which is pretty cool. And you got a picture sent to you from him. That's
totally.
That, I mean, was that when your career peaked, when you got that in the mail?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's all downhill from the Chuck Norris autograph.
I think it's a good point. Do you want to play a song for us and give us another song?
Yeah, I was going to do, as it would be in the time, I wanted to do a Prine song. I obviously, he's sort of the top tier influencer of anyone in my job, specifically me, to mixing humor and emotion. And so I was very sad when he passed. I know he'd been sick for a long time. So there was a time maybe 5 years ago where something happened, and I thought that it seemed scary. And anyway, it was just a real bummer day. So I've been trying to sing a lot of his songs, and always try, as usual, when these things happen, I try to avoid the obvious ones. But I had just did a thing last night at John Prine Tribute where I did his song All the Best, which I really like that song. But this one I want to sing is probably a pretty common one, but it's one of my favorites. And I love this song because this came very late in his career. And I'm always really proud of a musician who's like legendary status and then writes like a really good song. It just seems really hard to do. Like if you're the Stones or you're Paul McCartney or whatever, I don't know what happens at that level, but there's some sort of blockage of like, genius. And with Prine, this one, which came out on Fair and Square, which was maybe 2004, I think, when it came out, but his second to last record. And I'll play it. It goes like that. You and me sitting in the back of my memory, like a honeybee, buzzing around a glass of sweet shampoo. Radio's on, windows rolled up, and minds rolled down. Headlights spin, roll across the ground. We made love every way love can be made. We made time seem like time could never fade. Friday night, we both made the guitars up. Saturday made Sunday feel like it would never come. It's gonna be a long Monday, sitting all alone on a mountain by a river that has no end. Gonna be a long stuck like the tick of a clock. Come on, again. Soul to soul, heart to heart, and cheek to cheek. Well, come on, baby, give me a kiss that'll last all week. Thought of you leaving again really brings me down. But the promise of your sweet love brings me around. Gonna be a long Monday, sitting all alone on the mountain by the river. Gonna be a long Monday, stuck like a tick of a clock. Come on, again. Hey, again. It's a short little one, sweet. I like that song, and I feel like even though it's probably a little overplayed right now, it's one that I want everyone who didn't know about it to know about it. Check it out. Go to Spotify. Check out his version. Is the best.
That's a really appropriate song too on this Monday. So thank you
Yeah.
for that, man. That was
Totally.
wonderful.
Thanks.
So we got a few more things I want to talk about. Also, we've got some fan questions we're going to get to in a second.
Yeah.
If you all have any questions for John, you can comment below, and we probably won't get to them, but right now. But we'll go back and maybe he'll see some of them. We'll look back at the comments and stuff. But yeah, and also let us know where you're tuning in from, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for buying merch from John's website. Thanks for tipping to help keep this thing going, and thanks for being here and joining us. So I'm just going to jump right to it. So there was a moment in your career on your own, just you've built it up from the ground up. Every show's doing really well. You've had you've got the live album came out, the Mississippi Studios, live at Mississippi Studios in Portland.
Yeah.
I felt like everything's just honed in. We're doing shows in San Francisco. They're selling like 300 tickets. You're doing that nationwide at that point, or really close to it, in some of the major markets. And then comes along this opportunity to go on tour with Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
Now, talk about like stoking the fire. That's incredible. Can you tell us how you met Jack, how that happened? I think we got to hear that story.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And this is something that I could write a whole book about, which I would love to someday. So I'll try to give the brief synopsis because it is a complicated story, as these things are. But essentially what happened was the thing in the business that everyone thinks is going to happen, which generally never does, which is the simple fact of he heard someone gave him the CD and he listened to it, which I think is something that can be like a bad message to a lot of people out there, because I have a lot of friends who are like, man, if I could just get blankety blank to hear my album, whereas I know how musicians are. The moment that someone's like, you need to listen to this, then they're like, I definitely don't. If you're that desperate that you need me to listen to it, then you're probably not that good, And I just know a lot of like bigger musicians who really don't like when musicians hand them the CD. So, but luckily I had a couple of things that were going in my favor. A lot of luck. So I played a small house show in Santa Cruz. A woman was in the audience who was a friend of Jack's, and she bought the live CD. And then about a week later, she was at a party that Jack was at down in Santa Barbara. She gave him the CD, said, I think you'll like this guy. Now, he told me he definitely was not planning on listening to it because he's Jack. He gets handed a CD a day probably. But so that's luck number 2, and then the big luck number 3 is that he was on a road trip with his wife. They went through Big Sur. They got out of service, so no Spotify, no radio, and the only CD they had on them was that CD. So reluctantly, begrudgingly, he said, how bad could it be? Puts it in. So that's luck number 3. Luck number 4 is that he just so happens to be a big fan of that particular kind of thing, of like the Loudon Wainwright, Arlo Guthrie, John Prine, Greg Brown type thing. So had she given him like a studio album of mine, probably wouldn't have done the same. So he got really into that live album and obviously had not heard of me. So I think he thought that I was like a total nobody, which I wasn't, but I think in the Jack world, I was. And then through sort of a funny series of events that would take a while to explain, he and I got on the phone together, and he encouraged me to come to Oahu and play a show, a small show, almost essentially a house concert. It was in a public place, but and that's when we met. And then from there, sort of, I do think that Jack specifically wanted to help me out. I know he likes the music, but he's a very generous person, and I think his whole thought was like, I'm going to get John in front of all these people, and he did. So I'm very grateful for him for that, of course.
That's absolutely incredible. And
Yeah.
but I feel like the luck of a story, I mean, yes, there's some lucky things that happen there, but you kind of set yourself up for lucky situations to happen. I mean, it doesn't always
Yeah.
happen for everyone, but if you really think about all the energy you've put out into your art and your career, if out of anyone I know, you deserve that break so much. And
Yeah. Thanks.
it really is. Yeah. I mean, I'm so grateful. And it still blows my mind to this day to be in a huge room of people singing your songs. It's so cool and so surreal to me as a friend and as someone who's just known you since really when you started doing this touring by yourself. And it's so cool. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Thanks, Chris.
I remember I do a lot of shows with various artists, and a couple summers ago I had a show with G-Love and Special Sauce.
Yeah, I love G-Love.
We're sitting there at the table, and he goes, "Hey man," I mentioned something about, "Oh yeah, my friend John Craigie is gonna do some tours with Jack Johnson, and Jack Johnson and Garrett are really good friends."
Oh yeah, yeah.
And G goes, "Yeah, man, who is this John Craigie guy, man? Taking some of my gigs."
Yeah.
And it's just funny, like how your name has come up in conversations with, some well-known artists that I work with, or agents, or I'll be like Glenn Phillips one day goes, "Have you heard John Craigie before? I got someone sent me his thing." I'm like, damn, like everyone's like their buzz is real, and it's so cool how organic it really is, and how
Thanks,
diehard your fans are. Your fans are really great at hearing you play live, dragging all their friends to the next show, sending your music off. It's pretty special. I was having a beer and a little guitar hang with my buddy Dean Biersch, who owns Hot Monk, and he goes, "Hey, I've been learning this song. Check this out." And he played "I Am California."
Oh.
And I'm like, "How did you even know that song?" It was completely random. And he goes, "Oh man, I'm super into John Craigie." Anyways,
Nice.
just it's pretty incredible.
Thanks,
So
man.
I'm happy that Jack has helped amplify that. And I remember that tour you were playing with him at the Greek Theater in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know, that's about 8,000 people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was sitting next to your sisters, and my girlfriend Prine were in the audience. And literally, Jack Johnson comes out, introduces John to the audience, and you're playing in front of all these people. And I literally was crying.
Oh,
like,
thanks, man.
we were so happy to see that. It was just a huge moment, and I'm so grateful that I was there.
What a trip. Yeah.
So now you've got a new record that's going to be coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
You want to talk? It's Asterisk the Universe, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Totally.
And I listened to is it Valecito? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
The new single. So you got a new single, the Valecito, on it, and then on the B side of the single release is a Bee Gees song.
Yeah, yeah.
To Love Somebody.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the whole record. Can we talk a little bit about this new single release and just the concept of the new album?
Definitely. Yeah. It was recorded last spring in Sebastopol, or outside of Sebastopol, at the Rainbow Girls compound, and was of course been really lucky to have met them a few years back, and through meeting them got exposed to a whole nother side of the Bay Area music scene. And really, some people that I already knew a little bit, but all this sort of stuff kind of came together after meeting them. And we had played a bunch of festivals together with different artists kind of backing us up. A lot of the guys in the Marty O'Reilly band, and Lorenzo from Honey Drops, Jamie Coffis from Coffis Brothers. So it really made sense to do my project down there. And they really sort of saved me, because I didn't know, I wanted to have a venue where I could do what I did with No Rain, No Rose, which is essentially have a limitless studio time at all hours, let people sleep there, eat there, and live there, and then just make the music when we can. So yeah, it was really awesome to have them there, and to work with Bart Ludwig again as engineer, producer, and then just have that band. My buddy Nico came down too. So yeah, we spent about 5-6 days just playing the tunes, and not a huge expectation as to sort of what sound would come out. Just sort of played the songs and played them the best we could, and it was really cool to see what kind of sound came out of that.
Oh yeah, on the Vallecito single, there's so many cool sounds happening there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was actually going to ask you what what instruments are actually on that song
Yeah.
in particular.
I give a lot of credit to the different sounds to Nico there. He's playing electric guitar, but really doing it in a really great way. He, with that electric guitar, I think he creates over 3 like distinct different instruments almost. And then Jamie Coppis is on the Wurlitzer keys, Ben Barry on bass, and Matt on drums, Matt Goff on drums. And that's it. I play a little acoustic guitar, but I kind of kept that to a minimum. So it's just the 5 of us kind of grooving out on that one, you know, getting spacey.
It's really great, and the song's awesome. I was like writing down some of the lyrics, just like the poetry on it. It's really,
Thanks,
really
man.
great. I mean, you're writing every album you write, I feel like it's just better and better and better. And for those
So.
that are you know fans of the funny songs and you know the "I'm California" song, I mean, I invite you to dig deep into his records and really listen to the lyrics. I don't know if you have lyric sheets on with the album when it comes out, but it's great to read
Yeah,
along and dive into your writing.
yeah, those will be up on the website for sure. Yeah, thanks, man.
And what do
Yeah,
you know when the album's going to drop? Sorry for
yeah,
what I said.
June 12th, I believe.
June 12th. We'll all be on the lookout for that. You can listen to the new single Vallecito on Spotify, and then also you can listen to a cover of the Bee Gees song "To Love Somebody," which came out great. Which is like a
Thanks, man.
perfect way to close out a concert kind of thing, you know.
Yeah,
Like so, the recording of that really came out really great. What made you put a? You don't usually put cover songs on your records. The only cover song I can recall, unless I just totally missed, forgetting, but you had the Wizard of Oz song on one of your
oh
second
yeah,
records. If I
way
Only
back.
Had a Brain on his second record here that came out a long time
Yeah.
ago. But
Well,
what made you? Yeah.
these are with these actually. You know, I feel like we haven't made this clear yet. I need to make a good post about this, but these are the singles, and then the covers are the B-sides. So these will not that cover will not be on the actual album. But for the singles, I wanted to make them interesting to listen to even after the album comes out. And so my first single, Part Wolf, which came out back in March, had the Flaming Lips cover, Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell, as the B-side. That was just inspired by listening to a lot of Beatles history and how they would put out singles with songs that weren't on the album. So yeah, those are just the B-sides. But the record will have a cover of Crazy Mama by J.J. Cale. So for all those people out there. And then I have my new single that's coming out in May. I'll let that be a surprise. There'll be another cover on that too.
Oh man, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
I love it. Are you cool with taking a couple fan questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I compiled a few from the Facebook event here, so I'd be somewhat prepared. First one, you don't have to go into super detail. Whatever you want to do on these, we'll get through as many as we can. We got a couple minutes left, and then you'll play one more song maybe to close us out.
Yeah.
All right. Don Bostic asks, what happened to the painted guitar from a few years back?
That's a great question. I still have it. The story behind the transition from that was a couple things. That painted guitar is the guitar I bought when I was 16. It was the cheapest guitar possible at the Guitar Center. It was a Takamine G230. So a couple things about that guitar. It was very like cheap, and with the paint on it too, that really dulled the sound of it. So I had a lot of like audio problems with it. The paint on it was charming in a way, but I started to notice too, as I was being exposed to like newer audiences that didn't know me at all, it created a very interesting first impression. You know, for the fans, it was like a fun thing because they knew the funny story behind it. But to walk out on stage at a festival or like opening for somebody, I found that it gave kind of like people an immediate like, oh, who's this like Gallagher, like hippie, like it was goofy, you know. And what it was in, I think it was spring of 2015, I got booked to open for Todd Snyder on a run of shows after our famous weed debacle thing. And I knew that was going to be a good exposure tour. And I just wanted to be able to come out fresh and not have any sort of like assumed stereotypes of me. So that's when I got a new guitar. But it still exists. It's here in my house right now, and I still play on it sometimes, and I love it. And I
I
hope
remember
it.
I was like, you had called me before the Jack Johnson tour. I was like, you should play the painted guitar as a full circle. And you're like, we'll see.
Yeah. Sounds like
Now
how
I know their answer.
that's how I respond to Phil's suggestions. We'll see.
Let me think about that. No.
Yeah.
The answer is no. Kelly Walston asks, what do you miss most about touring and being on the road? I think she means during this time.
I mean, so much. I think that what I miss the most, honestly, is the merch table. Just that's one of my favorite parts of the show is meeting everybody, hearing their stories, getting to shake hands, getting to just talk to people, get that feedback. I find myself when I'm doing these live streams, especially when it's over, I feel that emptiness of, I mean, obviously just being able to like sing to a group of people and hearing the laughter and the applause, I miss a lot, but I really miss that merch table thing. I can't wait for the next time I'm able to do that. I'm really going to be so happy.
That's a really sweet answer. At first, I thought you were going to say, yeah, I really miss that merch table, that money.
No. I mean, no, there's that too, but honestly, like, yeah, it's just I miss that and the backstage hummus. Just kidding, but
yeah, I need them hummus and chips. John Craigie. Yeah. Adrian C asks, is there a venue that you've always wanted to play but haven't?
That is a great question. You know, I've been very lucky lately in getting to knock off some of those. The Troubadour in Los Angeles was a big one for me. I played that last November. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of them that I think would be amazing to perform at. And to me, honestly, I start having like excitement over sort of more like obscure things, you know, someday playing like, you know, I have visions of like playing in like museums, like somehow playing like at the MoMA in San Francisco under the Rothko painting or something, you know, organizing very unique things, organizing a concert like in Yosemite with Half Dome in the background or something like that. These are things that I hope as I get more successful and a little more leverage in the world with my booking agents that we can put some of those on there. But I love, you know, I'm not someone who really obsesses about what room to play. I just really want it to fit my audience best. And I think, I do think that there would be opportunities to play these more like unique spaces. That would be really fun for me.
Casey Turner presents John Craigie at Half Dome. I am in 100%. You hear that, Phil and Thomas? You hear that, boys?
Yeah, we're going to do it.
And he wants to do it. Jill Adams wants to know when you're going to do an Andre Bocelli. Did I say his name right?
Andrea Bocelli, yeah.
Andrea Bocelli cover for your mom.
Oof, yeah. Don't let my mom hear that. She'll be like, oh, Johnny. Yeah, that'll be a while. I guess I got to get my classical singing, my opera singing training down. But
I mean, you have time.
I got time.
Now, so now the excuses are they're disappearing.
Yeah.
Amelia Scoons says, what did you enjoy most about playing music for all the hippies at Burning Man for so many years?
I really loved performing at Burning Man as much as I also loved it. I also hated it because it was so out of control. You know, you never knew when there was going to be a power outage. I think there's one time I always talk about where I was at center camp doing my show and this parade of like 50 naked Santa Clauses came through, you know, which is a bit distracting. But I miss that. I miss the uncertainty. I miss sort of the weirdness. I miss the looking out in the audience and just seeing every kind of weirdo and freak that you can imagine. So there's nothing like it. And yeah, I do miss that a lot.
Amy Pearlstein asked, was there a teacher growing up that inspired you or encouraged you? And then second part of the question is, if so, has that person ever been to one of your shows?
That's a great question, actually. And I just had an email exchange with this guy. Yes, the English teacher I mentioned, his name was Mr. Mallon. He was my English teacher throughout most of high school. I can't remember exactly what grades, but my high school was kind of small. So I had him definitely more than once. And he's the one who gave me that first Bob Dylan record. He also, I believe, gave me a Joni Mitchell record. And he and I just talked a lot about music at that time. And he has been to a few shows, yes. And he's a great supporter. And I always give him props and thank him, for his initial inspiration, not just in what an English teacher does in general, but also specifically turning me on to those kind of artists at that time in the 90s when it wasn't obvious to listen to those artists. So Mr. Mallon, yeah, high school English teacher.
We should have some t-shirts printed up to say Mr. Mallon.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Very cool. Pamela Kiefer asks, what song do you continue to enjoy singing the most?
Oof, that's a great question. When people ask me this, I often, it's really hard. People that say that, like, what's your favorite song you've ever written and all that stuff. And it's really not something that I put too much thought into. They are like your children, and I don't have children, but if you have children out there, I'm assuming that it's not about favorites. But there are songs that I would think, like a song called Westbound Bart of mine, that is, I really enjoy singing that. Suck It Philly, songs that are very specifically about a very specific moment, like in my life, and the song does what I would hope a very good job of like describing that moment. It takes me back to that moment, and that's very special to me. So any of those story songs, there's a song called Cartagena that's about on my live album, that's about me staying at a hostel. Those ones are special to me because I get to do a little bit of time travel in that sense. So yeah.
On the Daddy Longlegs record that you put out a while back, there was a song in there called "Life Is Not a Cover Band."
Yeah,
and for me, that was a chapter in my life that was, for me, very pinnacle and personal. And for whatever reason, that song is like my little. If I ever hear that, I definitely travel back.
Yeah.
And just experience that moment. So, I mean, there's a bunch of your songs that do that for me, but that one in particular, for whatever reason, was the first one. I think it was the first song that popped out to me that was like, really just grabbed my heartstrings and kind of drug me in for the ride. So
I remember writing that song, being really happy with those lyrics and stuff. I remember that.
It's great. Yeah. And every time, it's a really long song. And I'd always, so back in the day when John was still playing bars and stuff, where you have to play covers and stuff, I'd always request it. And he's like, well, honestly, I'm flattered, but we're going to lose everybody if I play that song.
We're going to lose everybody. Yeah.
You're the only one, Casey. No, I love that song. We've got a few more fan questions here. We're a little over time, but we're doing okay. You feeling okay? Still hanging in?
I mean, there ain't no Zoom police that are going to get us, I don't think. Yeah.
It's true. I have absolutely nowhere to be.
Yeah.
At all. Yeah. Okay. Brandy Piper asks, what artist would you like to collaborate with? And if you had a choice to collaborate with anyone, perhaps, if you could pick one.
That's a good question. And there's an artist, I know you know him. His name is Dan Byrne. And he was one of my initial inspirations as a songwriter when I started. And I got to meet him at a Folk Alliance a few years back. And then he wrote to me about a few months ago with a very nice message, just telling me he liked what I was doing, which meant a lot. Was huge for me. And he and I have exchanged a few emails back and forth. And he's someone I'd love to collaborate with. I just think he's one of the best songwriters ever. And I think that specifically the way he writes, what I learned from him when I started writing was that whatever you want to say it, and let the melody and chords, they'll figure it out. Don't try to shape what you want to say to fit the song. Let the song fit what you're trying to say. And so I think he's brilliant, and I would love to work with him.
That's really brilliant thing. That's great songwriting advice right there. Dan Burns, a good friend of mine. He lives in Santa Cruz now. So we should hook that up. That would be fantastic. Yeah. And also, if you don't know who Dan Byrne is, he literally is like Facebook Living every single day.
Yeah, it's awesome. He's doing great.
You could find him quickly, and his catalog is easy to access. And he is a great songwriter. Yeah. I love that man.
Yeah.
I think this might be Dimple Bill Maria. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. She has a 420 he or she has a 420 question here. They want to know, Craigie, indica or sativa, and do you smoke it or do you weed it?
That's a really good question. Just want to shout out to all the states that are legal. I know we're lucky here on the West Coast. We got the nice green line with Washington, Oregon, California. And my sympathies and my support for all you states out there who don't have it legal, and for all you people who are doing what you can to get everyone's needs met. I salute you. But honestly, for me, I've never been that much of a connoisseur to know all the things. And So I think I don't know the difference between the two as far as when I have it, but probably I like the things that mellow me out. And then eat or smoke, probably yeah, again, whatever comes my way. I'm not a huge, it's not something I do all the time. So when it comes my way, it's like a nice glass of wine. I trust the giver, you know, to sort of help me out.
Nice. We have one more question here. London Turlock asks, this is a good question. Do you practice your onstage bits or does it come to you in the moment?
That is a good question. You know, you can't really practice storytelling by yourself, you know. So what will happen for me is that I'll sort of be like, I'm going to try this on stage. This is a thing that happened. And then the first time I go on stage, it's usually pretty loose and rough. And I think there can be a lot of beauty in that. But over the course of the time that I tell a story, I sort of trim the fat. I learn the beats, the pauses. But the practicing is basically the show. You know, there's really no other way to do it.
I'd like to add on to that question, something you shared with me before you did the Jack Johnson tour, because this is a situation where we're performing in front of larger audiences than you've ever been performing. We're talking 8 to 15,000 people, if not more. Yeah. Jack gave you some really solid advice about talking on the mic and storytelling. Do you remember, do you want to share that, or about just like the pause, like waiting for the delay of laughter? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Jack, I mean, cause that was the thing when he called me to say, will you open this tour with me? You know, I said, sure, but I thought he was being a little unrealistic, you know, and, you know, he said, we're going to do the Gorge, you know, was one of the venues, 22,000 people. And I said, what do you want, Jack? Do you want me to have a band? Do you want me to, you know, I said, what can I do for you? And he said, no, I want you to do exactly what you do on the Live in Portland. And I said, you know, that was in front of 180 people. And he said, well, just think of it this way. If 1% of the audience is listening to you, that's still more than your live album. And I was like, well, thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. But he said, you know, you do the storytelling. He said, but it's not going to be the same as Mississippi Studios. You're not going to tell a joke and they're going to laugh right away. There will be this sort of ripple effect as it takes, you know, the sort of split seconds it takes to get to that back of the crowd. So yeah, it was very, very challenging to do my normal storytelling for the Jack Johnson audience, even though they were very welcoming to it. I just I had to just arrange things a little differently, keep everything a lot shorter, and yeah, just hope that it made sense and came across.
And it totally did, and it worked. You know, being in the audience, hearing everyone around me like not talking, 8,000 people, because some of the shows people didn't even know there was an opener.
Yeah, because I would think most of them.
At the Greek Theater, I don't think there was an opener on the ticket, so everyone was there. Jack Johnson introduces you, so everyone's like, okay, Jack says, listen to this guy, I'll give him he better get me in the first song or two, and you do. That's your like butter right there. You come out strong always. And it totally worked. So it was just neat to see. We had a show that fall at Great American Music Hall that wasn't sold out yet. And I remember after you played your set at the Greek, I checked the ticket sales the next morning and we sold like 100 tickets. And that's just you promoting it on the stage. I mean, that was just amazing to see that kind of response. Yeah. Well, we're kind of out of time here. I want to thank everyone for listening. John, I would love you to play a song for us before we leave. Really quick, everyone, thanks for being here. This is this new live podcast I'm doing. It's called Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. I clearly do not know how to interview. I'm just talking to my friends. So be nice. I'm no Terry Gross. But I do have more of these coming up. We're doing them every Monday and Thursday. I've got them booked through May, and I'm already starting to book some in June. So it's every Monday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time right here on the Casey Turner Presents Facebook page. You can go to CaseyTurnerPresents.com to see the full lineup. The next one is this Thursday, April 23rd, with Bill Kirchen. Bill Kirchen's a legendary guitarist. He was in a band called Commander Cody back in the 70s, and he is known as Titan of the Telecaster, and it's going to be really great to talk to that Austin, Texas music legend. So please come back and join us, and thank you for buying merch from John Craigie's website. Thanks for throwing tips our way to help keep this going. All that stuff's in the comments below. And just more importantly, thank you for supporting music and hanging in there with us as we all sit tight at home and take care of one another. And I hope everyone just stays safe and continues to support. John Craigie, thank you again for being my guest, and close us out with a number. Love you, man.
Yeah, if you're down, let me show you. Let me do a little merch promo. So you can pre-order the new record right now on vinyl or on CD. And there's also some really cool merch that you can pre-order. This is a cool new Craigie hat. Got the little John Craigie. And this is one of we have 2 different shirt designs in the pre-order. Let me see if I can pull this up. This is this cool one with a little lyric from my new song, Don't Ask. I ain't old, baby, I'm brand new. So check those out on the link below. And this is a song that's very new. And it's just sort of was written a little before the quarantine times, but then it's been sort of honed throughout these times. So I haven't even named it yet, but it goes like this. You can see there's been a time of darkness. You can see there's been a little bit of light. You can see the same thing I get about the yeah, this whole storm began with the flap of a butterfly's wing. I was hoping I could make it end just by doing the same thing. Oh, I'm a good one if compared to a bad one. Maybe a good one is enough. Take this time to set yourself free. Take this time to reset. I'm done with poetry. I want to be obvious. And man, it's a slow burn when you come in out of the rain. And I'm somewhere between pretty and plain. Oh, it's a good day compared to a bad day. Maybe a good day is enough. Ain't no fairy, ain't no jungle, ain't no ocean that I don't want to tread. Ain't no trophies, ain't no endings, ain't no good love that hasn't broke. But I ain't much for holding on to the pieces I am more for letting them blow with the breezes. There's always a new heart after the old heart. Maybe a new heart is enough. Thanks, Casey.
It's nice to hear at least one person applaud, you know?
Yeah.
Man, I really had a lot of fun. Thank you again for being part of this. And
Yeah, me too.
I'm so happy to know you, and it's just so much fun to see you and your career. And just, I think your writing is amazing, and I'm always going to be a fan of yours. So I just wish you the absolute best. And I can't wait to for you to get back on the road and see you again when you're in San Francisco or wherever I get to see you.
You too, man. I can't wait.
I want to thank everyone again for listening to Casey Turn Presents Talk to Me. We're going to keep this video will live on Facebook. So if you missed stuff earlier, give it a minute or two. It'll refresh, reload, and it'll be here so you can share it with other folks. And please come back and join us again and continue to support these independent artists wherever you are by watching, tipping them on Facebook. Anyways, thank you guys all for listening to this. And again, John, thanks for being part of it.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah. See you.
Take care, everybody.